We're diving deep today into, well, a really fascinating mix of stories, everything from a bit of a constitutional stir in India to the big shifts in global power, and even how planting trees in cities isn't always straightforward. It's about getting behind the headlines.
Absolutely. Trying to understand the nuances.
Let's start in Kerala, India.
Yeah.
There's a significant controversy brewing, it seems, between the governor and the state government, and it's all about a painting of Bharat Mata, or Mother India.
It is, yeah. It's quite something how a symbol, something so embedded in emotion and history can become such a point of friction today.
So describe this painting for us. What's at the heart of it?
Well, this specific picture, the one the governor uses quite regularly at official functions, in Raj Bhavan, it shows a female figure. She's in a saffron sari holding a spear. There's a lion behind her, and the backdrop is a map of India.
Okay, and the governor does what exactly?
His practice is to bow before it, offer flowers, light a lamp, all before this garlanded picture, right before official events kick off.
And the state government? They're not okay with this.
Not at all. They've made their objection very clear. Their argument is, look, this specific image isn't recognized by the Constitution. There's no law backing it up. It's not like the national anthem or the flag,
Right. So they've drawn a line, refusing to attend functions if that picture's there.
Mm-hmm.
What's the background here, historically and constitutionally?
It's interesting. Historically, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, victory to Mother India, that was an incredibly powerful slogan during the freedom struggle, really galvanized people.
Sure, I think everyone knows that chant.
Exactly. But the key thing is, the national movement itself never formally adopted one specific picture, one visual representation of Bharat Mata. The image we're talking about has a different kind of lineage.
Ah, okay. So where did this image or the idea of it come from?
Well, you can trace it back. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, the Bengali writer, he first imagined a mother figure, Bangamata, Mother Bengal, in his book Anandamath. That was late 19th century, a symbol for Bengali nationalism.
Okay, Bangamata first.
Then, Abandranath Tagore, he painted this Bangamata in 1905. They look a bit like a Hindu goddess. And then Sister Nivedita, she was an Irish disciple of Swami Vivekananda, very influential. She's the one who really popularized that painting, but calling it Bharat Mata.
I see. So it sort of morphed from a regional symbol, Bangamata, into a national one, Bharat Mata, but through this specific artistic and advocacy route, not an official decision by the freedom movement itself.
Precisely. And then you have someone like Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first prime minister. In his discovery of India, he talks about Bharat Mata, but in a much broader sense. For him, it wasn't one figure. It was essentially the millions of people of India.
A very different interpretation.
Yeah.
More abstract, less literal.
Definitely. Which brings us back to the governor's role today. Constitutionally, the governor is the head of the state, but they're expected to act according to the Constitution and, importantly, on the advice of the elected government. So, using a specific image, especially one that's quite strongly associated with certain private organizations, political and ideological ones like the RSS and BJP, using that in official government functions, well, that's where the constitutional question comes in. Is that appropriate for the office?
So for you listening, this really lays bare a fascinating tension, doesn't it? You have this powerful unifying idea, Bharat Mata,
Yeah.
but when it gets tied to a specific non-constitutionally recognized picture, it can become a real political flashpoint.
Exactly. And it leads to these, well, the article calls them unseemly fights between governors and state governments, even though the Supreme Court has tried to step in and clarify roles before.
It just highlights that tricky line between national symbols and political symbolism. Okay, let's shift gears now. Moving from that specific Indian context to the wider world stage, global geopolitics.
A big shift.
Yeah, because the recent Israel-Iran conflict, the ceasefire, the U.S. bombing of Iranian nuclear sites, it seems to have really poked holes in this narrative we were hearing about rigid power blocks like a new Cold War.
It really has. The idea of this axis of upheaval.
Exactly. Iran took a major hit. The article even calls it a political and military decapitation of leadership and capacity. But its supposed big partners, China and Russia, they seem to, well, keep their distance.
Which effectively, as the article puts it, punctured that whole axis of upheaval concept.
So what were the strategic limits of this supposed axis?
Yeah.
Because there was cooperation before, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what fueled the narrative. You had Iran providing drone technology that was, frankly, very important for Russia in its war against Ukraine.
Right, we heard a lot about those drones.
And Moscow and Tehran worked together before that to prop up Assad's government in Syria, though that's obviously changed now. And China, well, China benefited significantly from buying cheap Iranian oil, which gave Tehran much-needed cash.
So it looked like they were working together quite closely on the surface.
It did, but the recent events really exposed the limits. The core argument in the piece we read is that these axes are often, maybe mostly, narrative constructs, meaning there are no formal treaties, no NATO-style Article 5 that says an attack on one is an attack on all. There's nothing binding these states into actual military blocks where they have to jump in if a partner is attacked.
Ah, I see. So they share some goals, maybe.
Yeah, they definitely share goals. Things like pushing back against the U.S. dollar de-dollarization, finding alternatives to Western payment systems like SWIFT, strengthening groups like BRICS and the ESCO, all that's real.
But no military backup guarantee.
That's the critical gap. When Iran was actually under fire, what did Russia and China do? Mostly it was political statements, diplomatic noise, criticizing those who support Israel, but no direct military help.
And Russia specifically seems limited in what it could do, even if it wanted to.
Very much so. Its military is heavily bogged down in Ukraine. I mean, they're reportedly even using North Korean soldiers, so they just don't have the spare capacity for major tactical help elsewhere.
And their foothold in the Middle East has weakened too.
Significantly. Their main military presence was in Syria, supporting Assad, but with Assad gone replaced, ironically, by a group that seems keen on engaging with the West Asia, Moscow's lost that key strategic base in West Asia.
What about China's perspective in all this?
Well, from Beijing's point of view, having the U.S. tied up and focused on West Asia isn't necessarily a bad thing. It potentially pulls U.S. military resources and attention away from the Indo-Pacific, maybe even from Ukraine. That aligns pretty well with China's own strategic interests.
So wrapping this up, it seems like a tough outlook for Iran. Not only did the axis of upheaval prove maybe less than solid, but its own network, the axis of resistance, with groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, they're also facing major challenges.
That's what the analysis suggests, and it leads to a rather stark conclusion in the article, that for Iran, looking ahead, developing nuclear power might increasingly be seen as the only real way to guarantee its sovereignty.
A sobering thought on how states perceive security in this shifting global picture. Okay, let's bring it back home to India and a really fundamental democratic issue. Voting rights for migrants.
Yes, a huge challenge.
The recent Lok Sabha elections in Bihar really highlighted it. Turnout was way down 56% compared to the national 66%. And a big reason cited was migrants just not being able to get back home to vote.
And the scale is immense. We're talking over half of Bihar's households having some connection to migration. Across India, it was nearly 29% migration overall in 2021.
Wow.
Now, a lot of that is for marriage, but about 10% is specifically for work. And that percentage is much higher in northern and eastern states like Bihar. So you've got millions of people potentially disenfranchised simply because they've moved for work. How do you fix that?
It sounds like you need different solutions for different types of migrants, given how varied the situation is.
Exactly. You can't have a one-size-fits-all approach. For intrastate migrants, people moving within the same state, that's about 85% of migrants. Often in informal jobs, the focus could be more on helping them travel back.
How would that work?
Well, the government could step up. Maybe stricter enforcement of the rule that polling day is a paid holiday so people don't lose wages. Perhaps even running special bus services to get them back to their registered constituencies. Things like that.
Okay, that makes sense for shorter distances. But what about the interstate migrants? People moving far away, often in really precarious, low-paying jobs. Going home just isn't feasible for many.
That's a huge group and often the most vulnerable. For them, the article discusses three main possibilities that have been explored. First, remote electronic voting machines, RVMs.
RVMs. Tell me more.
The Election Commission, the ECI, they actually demoed a prototype back in 2023. The idea was one machine could handle voters from multiple different constituencies, a big technological effort.
Sounds promising, but were there issues?
Oh, yes. Political parties raised concerns, ambiguity, how do you reliably identify voters remotely, how does it fit with the model code of conduct during elections, plus the sheer administrative challenge.
I can imagine.
Yeah, think about it. Voters would probably need to tell the ECI months ahead of time. Then the ECI would have to figure out how many RVMs are needed in every single city, potentially for hundreds of constituencies. It's incredibly complex for a country the size of India.
Okay, so RVMs are ambitious, but maybe difficult logistically. What else?
Second option, Postal ballots. This system already works for armed forces personnel, allowing them to vote by mail.
Could that be expanded to migrants?
It could, potentially. It seems maybe simpler operationally than RVMs for the voter, but it still puts a big administrative load on the ECI, registering people in advance, printing and sending out ballots securely, getting them back in time. It's not trivial.
Right. And the third option?
The third is allowing migrants to switch voting constituencies. This makes most sense for people who've moved more long-term, say, if they can prove they've lived in a new place for at least 6 months.
So they vote where they live now, not where they're originally from.
Exactly. The argument is this empowers them to actually have a say on policies in the place where they currently live and work. Makes sense, right? But, you might get pushback from people who've lived there longer.
Potential local resistance. And you mentioned something about women migrants specifically.
Yes, an important point. Many women migrate after marriage. So targeted voting drives to get them enrolled in their new place of residence could be really effective.
So it's clear, isn't it? No single magic bullet here. To really tackle this issue and empower millions of migrants, both within states and across state lines, you probably need a mix of these approaches. Postal ballots for some, maybe easier travel for others, constituency switching for long-termers.
A combined strategy seems essential if we want to ensure this huge segment of the population can actually exercise their fundamental right to vote. It's about making sure democracy reaches everyone, wherever they are.
Definitely. Now let's shift focus again this time to something environmental. And it's a bit counterintuitive. We tend to think urban greening is good. Plant trees, cool cities down, help biodiversity. Simple, right?
You'd think so. But a new study from Bengaluru, India, throws a bit of a spanner in the works. It suggests that, what kind of trees you plant really, really matters, especially for local birds.
Interesting. Bengaluru is a city that's seen massive growth, like many others, facing heat issues.
Big time. Rapid urbanization, losing green cover, setting new heat records, it's becoming a real issue. This study, it was published in Ecological Applications, basically found that bird biodiversity, the variety of bird species, was much higher in the cooler parts of the city with good tree cover.
And much lower in the heat islands.
Exactly. Those urban heat islands, the significantly hotter spots, had far fewer types of birds. And it's not just about habitat loss. Higher temperatures themselves can directly harm birds.
How so?
Well, other research suggests heat stress can lead to thinner eggshells, which obviously impacts reproductive success. Plus, it affects their food insects, nectar from flowers. Those are also very sensitive to heat.
Okay, so heat is bad for birds. But you said just planting more trees isn't the simple answer?
Right, that's the key takeaway. This idea of just simplistic mitigation, let's just plant loads of trees anywhere, can actually be problematic.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, not all birds like dense tree cover. Some species thrive in more open habitats, grasslands, scrublands. So blanketing an area with trees might help some birds, but hurt others.
Okay, different birds, different needs.
And the other massive issue is what trees are being planted. The study points to the prevalence of, frankly, unscientific tree plantations. Often cities plant non-native, sometimes invasive species, mainly because they look nice or grow fast, things like jacaranda or tabebuia.
And that's bad for local wildlife.
Hugely detrimental. The study found that currently, a staggering 77% of Bengaluru's tree cover is actually exotic, non-native species. These trees often don't support the local insects and birds that evolved with native plants. They can even harm human health in some cases.
77% exotic. Wow. So we're ignoring the local ecology.
Pretty much. We need to consider a city's history. What was the land like before it was a dense city? Bengaluru, for instance, wasn't originally all forest. It had a mix of open areas, farmland, wetlands, traditional gardens.
So restoration should reflect that original mix.
Ideally, yes. Urban greening needs to be smarter. It should include native grasses, native herbs and shrubs, and native trees. Think ecological restoration, not just tree planting. Another example is Pune. It has historical savanna areas on its hilltops, which are crucial for its open habitat birds. We need to protect and restore those kinds of spaces, too.
So for you listening, the takeaway is that tackling urban heat and supporting biodiversity needs a much more thoughtful approach. It's not just about the quantity of green, but the quality and the type.
Exactly. It means thinking about small home gardens, strategically placed native trees, preserving and creating larger, diverse green spaces, maybe even constructed wetlands, and critically respecting the city's ecological past and making sure these beneficial green spaces are accessible to everyone.
A much more nuanced picture of urban greening. Okay, let's move to our next topic. India's upcoming census in 2027. This one's significant because it's said to include caste enumeration for the first time since way back in 1931.
A major development. The stated goal from the government is to help bring marginalized communities, those left behind, into the mainstream.
And the process involves two phases.
That's right. First, there's the house listing phase, planned for 2026. Then comes the main population enumeration in 2027, and that's when the caste information will be collected.
So the potential is huge for understanding social dynamics. But are there challenges in making this data truly effective?
Absolutely. Collecting data on the scale is always complex, but adding caste brings unique challenges. The article we looked at raises some important points about the questionnaire design, based on what we know from the draft for the canceled 2021 census.
Like what kind of issues?
Well, while it's good that the caste question is expanding beyond just listing scheduled castes, there are questions about whether other data points collected are actually useful for understanding socioeconomic status by caste.
You give an example.
Sure. Information on, say, literacy, age at marriage, economic activity, even things like whether someone is seeking available for work or data on childbirths and survival. The article argues that due to conceptual issues or known problems with data quality in these areas, they might not be reliable enough for a really detailed caste-wise analysis.
So the way you ask the questions and which questions you ask really matters for the final usability of the data.
Precisely. And that leads to suggestions for reform. How can we make this caste census more insightful?
What are the key ideas?
One major suggestion is about restructuring when certain questions are asked. Specifically, questions about the quality of housing, household amenities, and assets, things that really indicate economic status.
Okay, what's the proposed change?
The suggestion is to move these questions from the first phase, the house listing, to the second phase, the population enumeration.
Why would that help?
The thinking is this allows you to directly link that crucial housing and asset information with the detailed population characteristics collected in the second phase, including caste. It avoids potential errors caused by the time gap between the two phases.
Ah, so you get a more direct snapshot linking caste to living conditions.
Exactly. And it might also free up the enumerators during the first phase to focus purely on getting the coverage right, making sure everyone is counted, which can be a real challenge, especially in dense urban areas.
Makes sense. Any other ideas to improve the process?
Yeah, there's also a recommendation to maybe make the census questionnaire a bit leaner.
Cut some questions?
Potentially, questions that might be a bit redundant now, like maybe detailed questions on mobile phone ownership or having a computer or bank account access. Perhaps that data isn't as revealing or can be gathered elsewhere now.
And the benefit of cutting questions.
It allows the enumerators, the people going door to door, to really concentrate on getting accurate answers for the most essential data points, including the sensitive caste question. It acknowledges that a census is incredibly hard work, but it's still, the best comprehensive tool we have.
So the big picture goal here is to get reliable, disaggregated data by caste. Not just for things like reservations, but for a much broader understanding of disparities across health, education, economic status.
Precisely. So that policies and programs can be designed much more effectively to actually address those inequalities. For you listening, it's a reminder that how we collect data directly shapes our ability to tackle complex social issues.
Absolutely. Okay, for our final segment, let's turn to a different kind of data, a different kind of voice looking at India's partition, but focusing specifically on Bengal and the experiences of Dalit and women refugees. Voices often missing from the main narrative.
Yes, a really important corrective, adding layers to our understanding. The article highlights Adhir Biswas's memoir, The Last Bench. It's a powerful account of his childhood experiences with untouchability.
Both before and after migrating.
Yes, first in East Bengal in a place called Magura, and then the same prejudice followed him when his family migrated to West Bengal around 1967.
What kind of experiences does he recount?
Really harrowing personal ones. Being essentially boycotted by his village, being forced to sit right at the back in the classroom, hence the title, The Last Bench. Even being denied his own name, people called him Paramanic, linking him to his family's barber caste instead of using his surname, Biswas.
Just brutal, everyday discrimination,
Yeah.
even amidst the upheaval of migration.
Exactly. But what's also striking is his response. He didn't just endure it. He fought back through education, started writing back in the 1970s, and eventually launched his own publishing house, Gang Chill.
Why start a publishing house?
Explicitly to make sure stories like his, these marginalized Dalit refugee experiences, were actually published and read. to ensure they wouldn't be erased from the record.
That's incredible determination. His story connects to a wider effort to bring these voices forward.
It really does. His work sits alongside others, like Manoranjan Biapari. You might know his books Interrogating My Chandal Life or the Chandal Jaiban trilogy. These are vital texts for understanding the complex reality of Dalit refugee life migration, caste violence, grinding poverty.
And scholars are also rethinking Bengal's partition itself.
Yes, moving away from seeing it as one single event in 1947. They're increasingly viewing it as a very long-term process. Migration didn't just happen in one wave. It was often a long, persistent trickle over decades, which makes it hard to put a neat, definite closure on its impact.
And these refugees, particularly in West Bengal, weren't just passive victims. They fought for their place.
Absolutely. That's a crucial shift in understanding. They were active agents. They supported communist movements. They engaged in large-scale squatting on vacant land demanding space. They insisted on rehabilitation, not as charity, but as a right.
So they were shaping the political landscape.
Definitely. The article argues they were actively pushing and stretching the vocabulary of rights in India's emergent democracy. Real resilience and agency there. And this applies to women refugees, too.
Tell us about that. How does the narrative change when focusing on women?
Well, Gargi Chakravarti's book, Coming Out of Partition, Refugee Women of Bengal, is highlighted. It directly challenges the dominant narrative that often portrays women solely as victims defined by loss and trauma.
Which isn't to deny the trauma, of course.
Not at all. But Chakravarti emphasizes that refugee women played a huge role in shaping the women's movement in Bengal. They radically changed the social lives of Bengali women. They had to come out onto the streets demanding survival, shelter, food, jobs. They became visible, vocal actors in public life in unprecedented ways.
So these accounts from Dalit writers like Biswas and Bayapari, the research on women's experiences by Chakravarti, they're not just footnotes to the partition story.
Far from it. They are invaluable additions. They profoundly enrich our understanding. They show resilience, they show agency, and they reveal the incredibly complex social changes that partition triggered, far beyond just the political division. It's about seeing history through the eyes of those who lived it on the margins.
A powerful reminder of the importance of diverse voices in understanding our past. Thank you for listening. If today's deep dive gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.